Good work. You're gonna take that, right? We're going to do it, right? You know, I feel like I know most of you. Some of you I've been with on 2 or 3 occasions, but first thing I want to say is those of you who have never met me before or have never worked with me before, I generally get pretty enthusiastic when I talk about things, but I want you to know that my enthusiasm, what I'm talking about, is just like the fairies. It in no way means that I think that I have all the answers. I don't think that. I don't know if you're like me. I don't like people think they have all the answers. I find that most of the people who have all the answers usually have none of the answers. And I talk all day, every day, and almost every night, and I disagree with myself quite a bit. Most of you know you can't talk a whole hour and have it all be true. No way. And I think that you've realized, having heard Mike and both Tom talking about, we're special friends. I've known Mike so long that I know things that I cannot tell. But unfortunately, he knows the same thing about me. And we've had some magnificent times together exploring what you all are doing right now. And the one thing that I wish, and if you ever hear me talk, I almost always say this, I wish that my mentor, the coach that I had for such a long time, I wish he were here to talk to you today, because if he were, you'd all like him a lot. And you, of course, know I'm talking about Walt Disney. He was very much like he appeared if you ever saw him, you know, on his opening to his television show. That was pretty much Walt's spirit. He was very at ease, very casual man who said what he had to say and embodied a lot of things you heard both Tom and Mike talking about today, and Matt, because Walt was what you got. When you saw him, that's the way he was. And he wore an old sweater most of the time, and he loved children and animals. He liked them best because he said that adults already know everything. And it's so hard with adults. And what I've been so impressed about as I've been sitting here listening to all of you is your openness and how I've been watching you take notes, copious notes. Most people never take notes. And one of the first things that I remember learning from Walt Disney when he really became my mentor as I went there to work for him, we were just beginning Walt Disney World. It was at that point in time. And as some of you here, I perhaps know, I was actually the 3rd person to go from California to Disney World. And we flew down in our Gulfstream, which was called Mickey Mouse One. And yeah, you can't imagine what it was like to fly into a little airport and radio the control tower, "This is Mickey Mouse One requesting landing instructions." I cannot repeat some of the language that came back. Some of them were Baptists that ran those control towers. But I've got to tell you that being the first one down there, as you all know from that part, it was just a swamp. And the people who lived in Florida thought we'd lost our minds coming to the middle of Florida. And some of you know, we built the castle first. Sleeping Beauty's castle came up out of the swamp into the Florida sky, and everybody said those guys from California have really lost it, building a castle in the middle of a swamp. However, that was intentional. Walt said the most important thing to do whenever you're starting a new project, or want to build your own life or build your own business, one of the things you always do is get your castle up in the air. Build your castle first so people can see your castle and want to be part of the castle, want to be part of helping you build the castle. Then, very important that they get to use the castle after you've done it. A lot of people build castles and then don't want you to move in. Called a shit. Well, pardon me, that's not swearing. That is intentional use of slang. See, Swearing is unintentional use of slang, but this is intentional use of slang. Now, it's intentional use of slang, see, to be accurate. You don't want to get off. But I thought what I would do today, some of you are cognizant of the fact that my partner who is here, where are you, Diane? I know you're in here somewhere. All of you have met her, and some of you have worked with her, and she's going to work with me all day Saturday. And one of the interesting things, she and I had a mentor-protege relationship starting back when she was in her early 20s, which I'll tell you about. And we have had the great honor to work with each other, and we've written 5 books together. And some of you came up here and told me you've read a lot of the books. I think the one book that I find is the most meaningful to me was the book Think Out of the Box. Many of you have that book. We made up the slogan, Think Out of the Box, to describe Walt Disney, as I told some of you in Aspen, and we wanted something that would show how Walt actually thought. And that Think Out of the Box was the expression that we used. And then we began to collect, and we wrote, and at Disney University, some of you know I was a dean of Disney University for about 7 years. And what we did, we tried to study from everything that we knew, because Walt was a guy who wanted to do things, but he also wanted to do things right, and he never liked anything to be a replica of what we did last year. He didn't like to do sequels and didn't like to make another picture. He wanted to build things and really try out new things all the time and experiment. So one of the things I'd like to suggest to you, if you don't mind my doing, I've been watching you. I'd like to suggest how to take notes on me for those of you who want to, or you can do what Tom says, actually listen, and then you won't need to take notes. You can remember. I find that people that really do listen do pretty well, remember things. But if you'd like to take notes, may I suggest, kind of like how you can kind of see how I do it. I lay it out in columns. And I'll tell you what the columns are ahead of time, so if you would like to use that methodology, you can. The first thing that you'll hear me say a lot, I'll say something is a major point. So if you're making notes, have a part of it where it says a major point. And so every now and then you'll hear me say to you, this is a major point. That means I really think you should listen to that, and you don't need to listen to anything in between if you don't want to. Well, that's another thing. People want you to listen to everything they say. God, that's terrible. You know, if you listen once in a while, that'll be great. But what I figured out is if you help people with it, like these are the major points, and these are the major points about 2 things, about thinking out of the box. What are the characteristics of people that think out of the box in order to achieve high-level success and personal fulfillment? And one of the things that becomes very apparent, this is my first major point, so those of you who are writing down major point, and that is in my study at the Creative Thinking Association, which some of you know I started a number of years ago, we have found one major thing present in great success stories, that somewhere in their past, I see some of you nodding your head, you know what I'm going to say, they all had strong mentors. They all had strong coaches. And that the one thing that they sought out throughout their lifetimes were strong mentors and coaches. I knew Walt clear up until he died. And he was even then seeking and reaching out to people to be his mentor when he was in his late 60s. So it's one of the first major points to ask yourself, how many people have you been a protege to at, and how would you be a mentor? So these concepts I'm going to show you, think out of the box, are both applicable to thinking out of the box and principles for being a good mentor. And one of the things that after that, number 2 column I recommend after major point are recommendations. As I go along here, I'll make some recommendations about things that I think you might enjoy doing or things that I'd like to suggest. The third major area are definitions. As I go along, every once in a while I'll say this is a definition because I think it's really important enough to get. I'd like to give you one right now while we're here. This is a definition that we use of creativity. And it's a very simple definition. Creativity is the making of the new and the rearranging of the old in a new way. And that the opposite of creativity is the tyranny of oddness, where you do things because you ought to, because you want to. Then you don't want to get out of bed in the morning because you know it'll be as it was yesterday because it's that way the day before. And, well, you all know this happens to a lot of people, and it's about the worst thing. It's about the worst thing that can happen to you. So you'll have a list of, and then last, number 4, are resources. As I go along, I'll give you a few resources that you could use if you would like to. In primary 3 major areas, I'll give you resources in. Things to read that I think that you'll find, things to listen to, and also a couple of instances of places to go. And you can put all these in, you can develop a program as we're going along together. Most important of all, I'd just like to say that most of these concepts you will discover as you listen to me are so simple. That is the one thing that impresses me so much about great concepts and great ideas, is that they're simple. One of the hallmarks of a really good idea is you don't have to talk people into it because it's such a good idea, they know it and they do it. And the minute you have to try to convince somebody, talk them into it, maybe there's something wrong with it. It's a fascinating phenomenon. I always, whenever I find it hard to sell somebody something, that maybe I don't have it right. Maybe I'm either the idea is not being developed correctly or I'm not presenting it correctly. So in the simplicity, I told a story, oh, by the way, I'll repeat, many of you here have my tapes, and I was very happy how many of you had Diane in my books. Quite a few of you have come up. There, I will talk about some of the things that are in there, but not very much, and I'll review a few things, those of you who've heard me, and some of you have my audio tapes. And you'll hear threads in there. What I'd like to suggest that you do, when you hear something that you know that you've heard from me before, try to abstract from it a new point of view, thinking of it as a good concept for mentoring and for a good concept of coaching. And by the way, I think of mentoring too as what we do when we're really good at it with our own children. That when you really work well with your children, you will apply most of the principles of mentoring. My second major point, and its simplicity, I hope won't elude you, but my second major point is to continually work for new experiences, for doing things that you really have not done before. And this is the reason why. You can't learn anything from experiences you're not having. And life is too long not to do it right. Most of us live about 30-some billion seconds. That's a long time to be alive if you're screwed up. I mean, no, you think about how long that is to have to exist if things aren't going right. It's awful. So that's, I feel, one of the reasons for doing it right, and one of the things is to have as many experiences as you can possibly have. And I would like to recommend, under your list of recommendations, the first experience I'd like you to do, and think about Diane and me when you go and do it. And that is to go to this place. And you all know where this place is. And this is, of course, the Eiffel Tower, and I want you all to go to the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Try to go if you can. Well, when you get through with this conference, be a good time. No, you can get a direct flight out of LAX right to Paris. You'll be there. Don't wait, because you want to be sure to spend your money. And if you don't spend it, you'll lose it, as we can see what's going on in the world. Spend it, You want to get a hold as much as you can and then spend it. And one of the things is to go to Paris, and I know all of you have probably been to Paris, but I bet you've never done the reason that I went to Paris and what I saw when I went to Paris, and that was this idea that was so crucial in mentoring and everything else. I had a friend of mine, I was not going to talk about this, and one of you here in the audience said to me, Mike, are you going to talk about that one thing that you said it takes to keep creativity alive more than anything else? And I couldn't remember what it was, and I said, well, what was it that I said? See, some of you here already remember what it was. I said, well, if you want to keep creativity alive more than anything else, is you got to get laid a lot. And I think they were surprised, I think, that I said that. But I believe in the truth. you know what I'm saying? And people, going around, that is what makes it go. And if you take that out of your life, forget about it, And I tell you, stay away from people who do. Because, you see, I have a friend of mine, some of you remember him. He was a Western writer. His name was Louis L'Amour, the author. And he and I used to love to debate, and we were friends like Mike Ferry and I are, and we would get together. Mike and I, for a long time, we were together a couple times a week. And we talked, and we argued, and we just had so much fun. I had the same thing with Louis L'Amour, who, wrote so many wonderful books, like How the West Was Won. And I said to Louis, how have you written? At that time, he'd written over 300 books, and something like 50 of them had been made into motion pictures. And I said, how do you do it? And he just looked at me, he said, Mike, what keeps creativity alive? This is a quote from Louis L'Amour. He said, is sex, passion, and desire. I said, what? He said, sex, passion, and desire. He said, Mike, that's what makes the universe go. You take those three things out, and you're finished. You will dry up. I said, yeah, I know some people have dried up. And I said, but Louis, how do you, sex, passion, and desire, how do you get that in the budget, The accountants, who already are uptight about everything, and the accountant types, right away, they'll go after you for that. And he said, go ahead and do it anyway. So here's what I want to recommend to you. To go to Paris and do what Louis L'Amour told me to do. I would never have done this. By the way, when you go in, those of you who've been there know, in this building, this magnificent structure, at this platform level right up here, it's the second platform before you actually get to the top, there's a little room in there. How many of you? Now see, when you don't even have to make your points, you're really there. We know exactly, you can be excused if you like. But anyway, in this, right at the top up here is a little tiny room, and what this room is two dummies, mannequins, one of Thomas Edison, the other of Gustav Eiffel. And what actually happened was when Thomas Edison was 80 years old, he wrote to Dr. Eiffel that he would like to spend his 80th birthday on the top of the Eiffel Tower. Could he make him a little room? And he wrote back, and being Thomas Edison, they said, okay. And he went back, and they made this little room. You go up there, you'll see it. And by the way, when you go into the Eiffel Tower, there's an electronic counter down just as you go through the turnstiles. And when you push through, you know what I'm talking about? Your number comes up. 20 million something or another. You want to have a number. This is a recommendation for all of you. You want to have a number in the registry of the Eiffel Tower. It's one of the things God asked you. Did you go to Eiffel Tower? Well, no, if you say no, you get sent back. That's why people keep getting sent back. They can't understand there's certain things you got to do. Now, what's going on, those of you who have seen this, what's going on up in this tower is that there's a telegraph key. And Edison is tapping out a message on this telegraph key, da-da-da-da-da-da. And of course, my weird mind, I wonder, what would Thomas Edison be sending off the top of the Eiffel Tower to all over the world on a telegraph key? Wouldn't that bug you? And I thought, I got to ask people. I asked people, guess what? Nobody knew. They said, well, we don't know. I said, what do you do here? I'm the manager. You might figure that. And he said, so I kept pursuing it till I finally did find a man that knew exactly what the message was going off the top of the Eiffel Tower. And this was the message that he was tapping out in Morse code. And it said, create something for us. In other words, Edison, speaking to you and me today, was saying, create something for us. Make something for us. And if you ever go there, you will hear that being tapped out. Just like some of you know, in Hollywood, on the top of the Capitol Records building, there is a large wing. And that large wing on the top of the Capitol Records building also has a light going on, flashing on. Did you know that? In Morse code. Just like on the Eiffel Tower, only on the Capitol Records building in Hollywood, those of you who live in Hollywood know, it is sending out a different message, and it was in Pretty Woman. Did you all see Pretty Woman? Can you believe that was a Disney movie? I've often wondered what Walt would have to say. I think he would like the movie, but I'm not sure if he liked it with Disney on it. But anyway, what the guy at the end of the movie, remember, was walking across the street, and he yelled, "Hollywood, what's your dream?" Remember that? Well, that's the signal, if any of you read Morse code, that's coming off the top of the Cap Records building, like create something for us that's coming off of the Eiffel Tower. So here's what you do. Take somebody you love or would like to love and take them, well, it's a great approach. Say, would you like to go to the Edison's room on the Eiffel Tower? They'd never heard that. That is a new approach, I'm telling you. Anyway, incidentally, before you go up there and exploring new things to do, remember that's the key in being a good mentor and being a good protege of a mentor, is to be sure to go after new experiences. I just can't tell you how important that really is, that exploratory nature of yourself. Before you go up the Eiffel Tower, and some of you'll say, you know, that you have claustrophobia and you can't go up a tower. Now, don't do that. Drink a bottle of champagne and then do it. But I know people get all the way over there and say, I can't do it. That's not good. You know, now, before you go up there, so any of you know there's a carousel at the base. Have any of you seen it? There's a carousel. It goes clockwise. The merry-go-round goes counterclockwise. And the carousel at the Eiffel Tower is real old. And I want you all, I've been looking at some of you, to sit and ride on the carousel. Get on one of those horses that's going up and down before you go up the Eiffel Tower. You'll have a ball. And then get off of that and go up, and you'll remember, and think about me and Diane when you do it. All right, then one of the things when we wrote this book that a lot of you have read, Think Out of the Box. By the way, that slogan is being used a lot now. We actually did it back right after Walt died. We developed this term, think out of the box, to describe him. And then when Diane and I started to put a book together in her mentoring programs, she decided, actually, why don't we use that slogan of think out of the box, which you can see why she's my partner, because she was absolutely right. And think out of the box now has really gotten picked up a lot. We worked on a project with Taco Bell. Have you seen that one? I spoke at the convention. I wanted to tell you about this, and they gave the books out, and then we released their new promotion, if you'll recall, Think Out of the Bun. I mean, isn't that as bad as it gets? but it was so bad it actually worked, you know. But anyway, at the end of this book, I want to recommend this book that you can get it. And one of the interesting things at the very end of this book is a description, not talking so much about what I am, but about going up on the top of the Eiffel Tower, doing this that I'm telling you about. And I'm going over it so much because I think everything that I say to you, the having new experiences is one of the most critical things that we often overlook because it's so simple. Just as you'll remember when they wanted to put an addition onto the Smithsonian Institute recently, they put out an RFP, a request for proposal, and if you'll remember, it was in USA Today. They got all kinds of responses back to put a new room on the Smithsonian Institute in Washington to honor innovators and inventors of our century. And everything that came back was very pedestrian, so they decided that they didn't know what to do. They didn't want to build just another thing. A woman on the team said, why don't we go outside the box? Why don't we get somebody that normally doesn't build buildings and put them on the end of museums? Somebody that thinks different. They said, how about a science fiction writer? Someone suggested, how about Ray Bradbury? Many of you know him. And Ray Bradbury worked a lot with me when I was at Disney. And Ray Bradbury was asked, would he do it? And he said, yes, I'd be glad to do it. My fee is $100,000, but I don't answer questions. That's my kind of fee, isn't it? He said, but I'll be glad to give you suggestions. You know, in architecture, we call it a solution. He said, I'll try to come up to a solution for your room and for your new addition honoring inventors. And they, of course, when they told him that they couldn't ask questions, they turned him down. But then you all know what happened. They started running out of money. And bureaucrats running out of money really get nervous. And so what they did, they said, well, let's hear what he's got to say. I wish I would have been there. I'd have given anything. They said that he came into this committee and said, I want to ask you all something. Do you have my check? That was the right question. And they said, yeah, they had his $100,000 check. And he said, well, it's been great working with you. I've really enjoyed it. You know I'm not going to answer questions. I hope I do see some of you again. The solution to your problem of building to honor all the inventors is garages. And I hope you have a wonderful time building it. And he walked out. But do you hear what he said? Speaking of simplicity, garages. And that's what they're building. The garages of the great inventors of our time, of Thomas Edison and Stephen Jobs and the Wright brothers. You'll be able to go through their shops and the place. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. Worth $100,000, you see? But another reason, and I'm not accusing any person in this room, I have not seen this at all, but the third major point that I would like to make about mentoring and thinking out of the box, I found here you all did not have this problem, and that is that we know creativity and people's personal growth and development flourishes in an environment of great humor, where there's lots of laughter, lots of playing around, lots of rolling on the floor and blowing air into somebody's stomach. In fact, that's one of the finer things. But you know what I'm talking about. If you have not blown on anybody's stomach lately, you got to do it. You know what I'm saying? Find yourself a little girl. No, seriously, find yourself a little, or a big girl, it's all right. And even though it sounds strange, it is really, I think, one of the more important things, because we're too serious. We're just, some people, they're so, make you sick, they're so serious. Listen, look around you. This is hysterical, this whole thing. Look at people in here. There are people in here that started out as a beautiful baby. Now, something happened. Well, I don't mean to be critical, but you know something went wrong somewhere. Now, but I'm telling you, you all know in this room, the minute you start that process of laughter, it begins to dissipate. It goes away. I hope you don't mind my telling you this. Please don't quote me. I'll deny I ever said this, but I have, Diane will affirm it, I have, I don't know what it is about me, great relationships with a lot of nuns. For some, I don't know what it is, but nuns really go for me, and they, I know it sounds terrible. It sounds terrible to stand up here and telling you this, but they invite me. I do quite a number of nuns conventions, and I was so intrigued for a long time. What do nuns do on a convention? You know, I know what accountants and bankers do, but I had nothing is, of course, what they do. But listen, I've been in places where I did the conventions. They do them like a nunneries and places like that. I have been in places where the toilet seat had never been lifted. You know what I'm saying? It would actually, no, it would squeak when you would try to put up the toilet seat. Now, you see how I look at stuff? That's why, to me, everything I look at is hysterical. Some people, in fact, a couple of you said to me, Mike, you always seem to be smiling. Why is it? You know why. Because I'm seeing some things that are really funny. But anyway, you know, if we'd all in this room laugh at our sins, we'd laugh for our lack of originality. If somebody commits an original sin, I want to know what it is. No, seriously, you have my website and stuff. If you find one, please send it to me. Mike Ferry would like, I'm sure, and maybe Tom too, would like to have a copy of that. to know what that is. So go to the Eiffel Tower. Then do like I did when I had this nuns convention. But I don't know if I should tell you, the head mother of a big order, her name's Sister Ramon. I'll tell you something about her a little bit later. But Sister Ramon wanted to come to Disneyland. And I don't know if you've ever taken somebody like a nun through Disneyland. And I said, Sister, what would you like to do first? And she said, well, I'd like to ride on the Matterhorn. I said, the Matterhorn. You know, that's the bobsled. You go about 105 miles an hour down and all around curves through water. I didn't think that was the best way for about an 80-year-old nun, Mother Superior, to begin her experience at Disneyland. But you try to convince a Mother Superior, forget about it. But wait, the best part of this story is how all of you here have ridden on the bobsled. Is the first person sits in the bobsled, right? Then the next person sits in between your legs. Got it? That nun, you have not lived till you've had a nun strapped to you in a bobsled. Yeah. Oh my God. I know that's terrible, but do you know something? We went on that thing 4 times. Sure. Well, we got to be pretty good friends, I want to tell you. But, by the way, when you're on the top of that Eiffel Tower and think about Louis L'Amour, one of the things that he told Diane and I was, as you stand up there, look over, from the top, you can see the river, and especially beautiful at night, and look at the Louvre, and look at Montmartre, and look at the Basilica of the Sacred Heart and Notre Dame, and all the things you see in the mise-en-scene up from the top of the tower. And when the minute you do that, you begin to see what he meant. He said, Mike, if you take sex, passion, and desire out of the Louvre, it'll be empty. There won't be one piece of art. There won't be one great sculptor. There won't be one beautiful painting. It'll be gone. And I went just to look at that idea, and boy, was it true. So Edison, who had not long before his experience on the Eiffel Tower had also, you may have seen this, it was on television, Science Channel the other day, he had worked on the concept of what to say with his friend Alexander Graham Bell when you answer the telephone. And some of you know he made the phonograph, and when he made the phonograph, he talked into it, and he said, Mary had a little lamb. That was the first thing that he recorded on the very primitive phonograph, and when he cranked it back, it was distorted. It didn't come out very well, and it went like that. And Edison was profane and yelled out, hell no. In other words, all the work that they'd done, and he had this terrible result, and he kept saying it over and over again until hell no became bastardized and became a word. You all know what the word was. Hello. And he called his friend Alexander Graham Bell and said, I got a great way to answer the telephone. Say hello. And that is how hello was born. And so when you get up there and think about, and you'll see it in the back of our book, create something for us, that's what we're about. You heard Mike talk about it, and you will hear me talk about it anytime you ever hear me talk about it. It's to create something. There's a bestseller in every person here, at least one. There may be more than one bestseller book, but there's at least one bestseller book in every person in this room. And that's the thing that, more than anything else, I love to help encourage myself to do more and people to encourage more. So when you go up there, listen. By the way, would you like to hear it? I brought it. I did, and Di thought I had flipped out. I bought and recorded. There it is off the top of the Eiffel Tower. Okay, so that when you go there, also tape it, okay? And, okay, that.